As training camp approaches, we'll be reviewing several players' performances in the 2023 season and discussing how they could impact the Eagles during the 2024 season. Today, we'll be discussing Reed Blankenship. Reed Blankenship really stepped up as a full-time starter in his second year in the NFL. While there's a group of doubters, I think he's a very good player that put a lot of solid stuff on tape. So let's see what his game's all about. And coverage, he wins with quick processing, a good football IQ, and great technique. He understands how offenses look to attack different coverages, and it allows him to play fast because he knows where offenses are looking to go with the football. A great example of this would be the Cowboys game. He was able to break on a dig route as a post safety in cover 3. He saw the dig route come and he broke on it right away because they knew that offenses were really targeting the middle of the field when they were in empty and when they were in that coverage. He's great at reading the quarterback's eyes and the depth of their drop and adjusting his coverage. He takes really good angles on throws, whether that's as a post safety breaking based on the quarterback's drop, direction of his shoulders and body lean, or in man coverage where he understands routes and how to make it the hardest throw. Like for instance, there's a play against CeeDee Lamb in, again, one of the Cowboys games where he used a slingshot or a hook technique to really use CeeDee's body to propel him to undercut the corner route. And it really made Dak try to put air on the ball and fit it over top of Reed. He also did the same thing on the Terry McLaurin pass breakup he had against the Commanders in overtime where McLaurin stepped on his arm. He saw the corner route coming, and instead of trying to chase it, he tried to undercut it and beat him to the spot, and it ultimately ended up working out. He's able to win in man coverage based on his understanding and his technique. It's not his athleticism, although I think he's a better athlete than most give him credit for. He's a ball hawk as well. He had 3 interceptions, was tied for 11th among all safeties last season. He also had an interception in his 9th career defensive snap against Aaron Rodgers. And it wasn't just like the ball ended up in his lap. It was a play where he baited Rodgers. He broke on the throw, took a good angle, broke with conviction, and jumped the route. His forced incompletion rate was 23rd out of the top 100 safeties in total snaps last season. And he has PBUs against CeeDee Lamb and Cooper Kupp and man coverage. So that carries weight. And run defense, he's good filling the box from top down. And as a tackler, he's pretty good in open space. His missed tackle rate in 2023 was 34th out of the top 100 safeties and snaps. And what really helps him out is he uses a good long stride, short stride technique where it really helps him close space quickly. And then as he approaches the ball carrier, he's continuing to close space, not just breaking down and standing still. He continues to close space, but he's closing space much more controlled, and he's able to make tackles that way. That's something that if you saw our CJ Gardner-Johnson video, that he needs to get much better with going into next year as a safety. Now, in terms of his athleticism, there's a notion that he's slow and unathletic relatively for an NFL player, but he has more than enough speed to play the position. If you were watching the NFL Network's draft coverage this year, they went through the top 10 players at each position, and they looked up the average 40 time for all the players. The average 40 time for the top 10 safeties in 2023 was 4.54. Reed ran a 4.55. It's also faster 40 time than Justin Simmons. Hufanga from the 49ers, who was an all-pro, not last year, but the year before. He tore an ACL last year. That was also a faster 40 time than Brian Dawkins and Ed Reed. Is he the greatest athlete ever at safety? No, but there's a lot more to playing safety than just being extremely fast. But most importantly, this is by far the most important factor for Reed Blankenship, and what makes him so valuable to the team is his communication and his ability to make things right when things are going wrong. Communication is paramount at safety. You have to communicate with your other safety. You have to communicate with corners. You have to communicate with linebackers. Sometimes you have to communicate with the defensive linemen to make the run fits right if the safety is in the box or in the run fit. Reed got them right a lot. There was an example of a play against the Cardinals last year where it was legitimately 16 seconds where everyone's pointing at each other because they don't know where to go and where to get lined up. The guy that got them lined up, because they ended up getting lined up right at the very last second, the guy that got them, figured it out and got them lined up was Reed Blankenship. And when things break down, because things are going to break down in football, there's a clip on YouTube of Malcolm Jenkins talking with Brian Baldinger, and they're going through tape study, and they pick a play where someone blew a coverage. Malcolm realized it and got over and covered for that player. Reed has shown that ability as well. Specific example, again, going back to the Cardinals game. There was a play where the Cardinals were motioning. They were using an orbit motion to try and gain some leverage on the defense. What the Eagles were trying to do was have the safeties rock and rotate with that motion. So what that's doing is the safety that's down in the box is going to rotate to the post, and the safety that's on the post is going to rotate to the opposite side. The whole reason defenses do this is so you don't get out leveraged on jet sweeps or quick actions to the perimeter. If you were to try and travel that corner that's lined up over their receiver across the formation with them, they're chasing that player and they're going to get out leveraged. So what they tried to do is rock those safeties. But what happened is Maddox, playing his first game back with the defense, decided to travel with that safety after Blankenship and Byard had already communicated. Blankenship realized that Byard was rotating down and so was Maddox, and there was no one covering a receiver on the opposite side. So instead of playing the post safety, he comes back over and takes that receiver and makes a tackle for, it ends up being a first down, but it could have been a touchdown if he wasn't paying attention. So those are things, being able to see things and adjust on the fly is a huge factor in defense. And there's no stat and there's no metric I can give you that's going to show you that. It's just something you have to see on film, and Reed has it. So I think this is a player that I think should be a core player for the Eagles going forward, even after his contract is up in 2026 or after the 2025 season going into 2026. So I'm really thrilled for Reed, and I'd like to hear what you have to say about him.
Yeah, I also like Blankenship. Now, just going back, trying to figure out how last season materialized for him, coming out of the gates, he looked like, after Reddick, probably the best player on the whole defense to me. But he did sustain a rib injury in week 1. And then in the Jets game, he had that brutal blindside hit from Alan Lazard, who he got fined for. Then he got a concussion protocol in the Dallas game, and then a groin injury at the end of the year, which he had surgery on in the offseason. Now, we did talk about how it's football, so everyone gets injured. The reason I bring it up is because there was a dramatic change in how he looked on the field. Let's call it in the game 1 and 2 after some of those injuries. Now, there were so many injuries that ended up being like half the season. And it just was very noticeable to me where when he was mostly full health, he was extremely quick to trigger downhill. Like you said, his diagnosis ability is off the charts. There's a reason. If you're undrafted from Middle Tennessee and you are vaulted into a starting position in year 2, what does that tell you? Especially if you're not a guy who has world-class athleticism. Like you said, he's a solid athlete, but definitely not a groundbreaker. He is a very aggressive player. There are times where, let's say it's a screen and you've got a couple 300-pound linemen out in front with a dynamic ball carrier. He knows that he's at a big disadvantage in those scenarios. So what he'll do is he'll come in like a freight train, and I don't know what the technical term for this is, but he'll basically just blow up those blockers, stop them in place, so then there's a lot less room to run, and the ball carrier has to slow down, which also gives the other guys a chance to get in the play, and he's fearless in that sense. He's a ball hawk. We've seen several plays now in his career where he'll come flying in off the screen and make a diving interception. He'll mix it up in the box. You'll see times where he's basically playing like a quasi linebacker, and he's well suited for that role. You know, some of the big weaknesses I saw that showed up specifically after his injuries was his range got considerably shorter, where, you know, let's say he was playing half the field on the weak side of the play. In the weeks where he was healthy, he would have no problem navigating that. And then I saw him having a lot more trouble making up ground after he was injured. Playing with a high pad level, coasting a lot, really poor lateral agility. If you watch like just week 1, for example, when he's shuffling side to side, he looks great. And then you go to like the Bills game and he can hardly move side to side at all. It showed up in the 49ers game as well, getting bulldozed by ball carriers and by linemen. That's not who he is. To me, that was just a product of him being, to me, a way lower percentage of health than maybe people would know about. I think the guy was playing at 50% out there for a lot of the year. So, from all accounts, his surgery went well, and to me, when he's full health, this guy's easily a solid starting safety in the NFL. We'll probably talk about it more in our long pod about the potential to like bring in a veteran safety because people I've heard through the grapevine view him as a good third safety, but not really a starting option. And this is going to be a controversial opinion, but I don't see him as a distinctly worse safety than Gardner Johnson. When they're both fully healthy, I actually think he's more reliable. Now, yes, he's not nearly as versatile and he's not as much of a playmaker, but he is, to me, more reliable, especially in the tackling department. You know, Gardner Johnson, he's the kind of player where you want one of him on your defense. If you have three Gardner Johnsons, it's way too chaotic. It wouldn't work, but you could have a bunch of Blankenships because they know their role, and like you said, they patch a lot of issues that can happen pre-snap in communication and post-snap if someone blows a coverage. Sometimes you can identify that someone's blown the coverage and make up for it before the quarterback realizes it. He's a guy who could do something like that. So I'm definitely more positive sentiment about Blankenship than I think the average Eagles fan is, especially after last year. And so I hope he just stays healthy and can demonstrate that on the field.
Yeah, in terms of CJ, he's definitely a lot more polished as a safety than CJ is, and we'll discuss some of that on the long pod, why that is more in depth. So I don't want to make this a CJ discussion. And it's funny you talk about you don't want three CJs on the team. Well, when we talk about our guy next, he is a little bit of a CJ clone. But having said that, like you said, there was a number of Eagles fans that were, I feel like kind of got a little put off with him down the stretch of the season. I think there was a few plays that really stood out. Like there was a 60-yard play he gave up against the Giants, just a huge mental lapse. And I think that's some of the things that are issues for him is that, he is a young player, right? Second year in the NFL, first time fully starting. I think there were a few mental lapses. One was that Giants play. What he was trying to do.
Was that to Slayton?
Yeah. So what he was trying to do, they were running a flood concept. The Slayton was running a very deep corner route. Is really more of a clear out route is what it's trying to do. But I think Reed saw he was running a corner route and he tried to undercut it, like he tried to undercut the CD Lamb and the Terry McLaurin corner routes, but it wasn't the same type of corner route. So when Slayton kept going vertical up the field, Reed just got outran, and he's not a good enough athlete to keep up with a guy like Slayton if he's not on his P's and Q's. So just little things like that. Another example was a play, like sometimes he'll be late getting down to a receiver on that he needs to cover on third down because he's trying to disguise his coverage. Like there was a play against the Bills. He was late rotating down to the flat because it was like 3rd and 4. He's trying to show too high, and then he just, he gets out leveraged and the guy catches the ball. There's a play against the Cowboys and their Week 9 game where he bites on a run fake when he is supposed to be playing the tight end and then gives up a touchdown. It's just little things like that it's like you just got to clean up those little issues. And then on top of that, he's not the man coverage guy I'd prefer, especially with how this team's, configured. If there's going to be two safeties on the field, CJ and Reed, and they end up playing man coverage, I'd rather Reed rotate to that post safety and have CJ down as the man coverage guy. Even though I think CJ has more range as a post safety, I think that Reed is just not a good enough man coverage defender to consistently want to put out on guys like that. And especially with Fangio's defenses, his safeties, especially if they're blitzing the slot corner, will end up playing man coverage on receivers more often than you'd think. So you need some versatility there. Now, his fit in the Fangio defense that I just want to get to real quick, I think he's best as a safety that rotates down as opposed to being a post safety, like I kind of just mentioned. So the safety that's playing your flat rolls, your hook rolls, your buzz safety, your robber safety that can kind of patrol the middle of the field and in that intermediate area, read the quarterback's eyes and break. He's really good at that kind of stuff. He's fine as a post safety. He's just, that's not where he's best at, right? And I would like him as a weak safety in Fangio's defense because although they do, there's not a typical box safety, the weak safety in Fangio's defenses are the ones that are usually rotating into the box more, whereas the strong side safeties are the ones that play coverage more. So if they want to flip their safeties, they can do that. It's not something Fangio has done really that much in the past, but it's something to think about. Now, as far as future outlook, he's signed through 2025. The Eagles extended him this offseason. CJ is probably gone in 2026, and Reed is a year younger, actually probably a year and a half, I think. So wouldn't be surprised if it's him and Sydney in the mix in 2026, or DeJean or another safety. So we'll have to see. He's on the team for another 2 years. I'm very excited for that. We'll see where it goes. And he could, like I said, I hope he's a core piece going forward after that. He's one of those glue guys that can really be your green dot on the defense. And I'm excited to see him continue his growth.